Happy Wednesday, everyone. As you know, I am Big Italy 42, and this is the Daily Fantasy Cafe podcast. As always, I'm here talking some NBA. We're getting closer and closer to baseball season, and that's exciting news for those of you and myself who are huge baseball fans. Can't wait for baseball DFS. But right now, we have a huge 12-game slate on tap tonight in the NBA. I'm going to give you the breakdown of each and every game, starting at the top. So, Detroit at Charlotte. Charlotte a 5-point favorite in this one. 196-point total. I'm going to be talking, as I do, FanDuel and DraftKings here. Your targets in this one are going to be the same targets that you've had before. Obviously, you're looking at Greg Monroe, doubtful once again. He said he's hoping to return soon. There's rumors that he sits out for the rest of the season, gets shut down. I'm not anticipating he plays. Reggie Jackson had some nausea last night. Only played 22 minutes, but managed a double-double still and 31 fantasy points on FanDuel. So he's certainly in play again, assuming he's feeling better. I would think that he is. $8,600 on FanDuel. A steep price like it was last night, but for his upside, a good matchup against Kemba Walker. He's a fine target. $8,700 on DraftKings. On the other side of the ticket here, you've got Kemba Walker, who's playing tremendous basketball. $7,500 on DraftKings. $8,400 on FanDuel. So a much better price, nice discount there on DraftKings. Elsewhere in this game, you're looking at some other injury concerns. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist still out. You've got Cody Zeller, who will not play again tonight. So that means Marvin Williams, once again, a nice value play. He's been playing some big minutes and 24 more fantasy points, 3 straight games. You can get him at $4,600 on FanDuel. On DraftKings, he's sitting at $4,700. So nice play there. Anthony Tolliver had himself a nice game last night. Played 40 minutes, 29.5 fantasy points on DraftKings. Still only took 9 shots. He's not a big upside guy. Nice cash game filler if you need someone. 4K on DraftKings and 45 on FanDuel. So he makes for a fine play. Should need to tell you that Andre Drummond is a great play once again tonight. $9,400 though on FanDuel. Pretty expensive. Got Al Jefferson down low. Not known as a great defender, but tends to draw his defenders away from the basket because he shoots jumpers. So could be a little bit of a negative there for Andre Drummond, but I'm not too concerned. He's taking right around 10 to 15 shots a game right now. He's had huge point productions recently, 32 and 22 in his last 2 games. $8,900 for DraftKings. I like him as well. Elsewhere on the Charlotte side, I still like Gerald Henderson, despite the down game last time, sitting at $5,600 at small forward on FanDuel and at shooting guard at $5,700 on DraftKings. Next game we've got on tap here is going to be Philadelphia at Washington. Washington, a 10-point favorite, 192.5-point total for this one. And this one's ugly. I mean, you've got a 12-game slate tonight, so, I mean, I'm of the belief that I'm not going to be forcing guys into my lineups from games like this. But, obviously, an ideal matchup for John Wall here, sitting at $9,800 on FanDuel. A little pricey, but still, big discount on DraftKings at $8,800. So you like his matchup there. Obviously, Nerlens Noel, the main target for Philly. $8,000 on DraftKings. Over on FanDuel, he's at $84,000. So his price, as we know, been creeping up there. But he's been producing. He's got to be the top option there. Elsewhere at this one, you could look at some other guys. You could look at a guy like Marcin Gortat, who has played really consistent basketball. He's had a couple big games, but nothing tremendous. I mean, a big game against Charlotte 2 games ago. Other than that, you're expecting 20 to 25 fantasy points out of him. But potential blowout, we've seen him play small minutes. Not really a guy I'm looking at too much tonight. You've got a guy who's really interesting here, Furkan Aldemir. 27 and 20 minutes his last 2 games, 25 and 14 fantasy points. Not a huge upside guy, but if you need a filler at power forward there, he's a minimum salary on FanDuel, $3,300 on DraftKings. I don't mind him there if you have to fill in someone in a tournament, but certainly not a cash game play. Elsewhere on this one, I'm moving on. Not a lot to see here. Next up, San Antonio at Orlando. 9.5-point favorite for the Spurs. No surprise there. 197.5-point total. And your targets in this one are going to be the usual suspects. You've got a guy like Tony Parker sitting at $6,100 on FanDuel. DraftKings, once again for Tony Parker, a nice price for him. He's sitting at $5,900. Good matchup for him against Elfrid Payton, who has been filling up the stat sheet, but significantly more expensive. A fine matchup for him individually, not as a team. Spurs are a good defensive team. Tony Parker not good at the one, obviously, giving up some pretty big games recently. Elfrid Payton, though, at $7,600 on DraftKings. You can play him in some tournaments. I'm not playing him in cash games at all. $7,500 on FanDuel. It's still pricey, but good upside for a tournament. Elsewhere with the Spurs, you got to be careful. You're on the second end of a back-to-back, although they are the one team of the main big teams that haven't been resting starters because they are still battling for playoff positions. So my thought is that everyone will play. Maybe they don't play big minutes if the Spurs have the game in hand. But once again, your main target, Kawhi Leonard, $8,200 on FanDuel. Over on DraftKings, $8,100. You got to love him in this spot tonight, going against Tobias Harris. Orlando terrible against small forwards all season long, so he's got to be your main target there. Other side of the ball, Victor Oladipo, a little pricey for me. More of a tournament play. Really just not a lot of upside built in at his price tag. Tobias Harris will get Kawhi Leonard, so that's a no thanks for me. Not looking at anyone at power forward. Tim Duncan, not trusting him on the back-to-back at his price tag. You could look at Nikola Vucevic at $8,100 on FanDuel. DraftKings, he's at $7,800. Spurs have struggled with big minute times this year, so he's going to be matched up with Thiago Splitter quite a bit, who was producing well, saw some nice games, and struggled against Miami last night. We'll see how many minutes he gets tonight. Maybe we see some news. Maybe he'll rest. Maybe we'll see some Aaron Baines. But other than that, not a lot to love in this one. All right, next up on the docket here, we have Indiana at Boston. We've got Boston as a 3.5-point favorite, 201 point total in this one. And this is going to be a tough one because Indiana, a good defensive team, so you don't want to go overboard on Boston, guys. But you've got a guy like Evan Turner, who we know has big upside, sitting there at $6,800 on FanDuel. He's a nice tournament play, certainly not a cash game play, especially that price tag. You've got him at point guard on DraftKings, where he's sitting at $5,700. More playable there, especially in tournaments for me. Still not a cash game guy. We've got Avery Bradley, another guy who is a tournament play coming off a great performance last time out against Charlotte. 30 real points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists. He's sitting at $57 FanDuel and $5,800 on DraftKings. So he makes for an okay play. Aside from those two guys, really not looking at anyone on Boston's side. Tough matchups for everybody all around. And a slow-paced game, so no thanks for me there. George Hill is in play, but his price is really, as we mentioned yesterday, really up there. $7,400 FanDuel, $75 on DraftKings. So really not a guy that I'm actively targeting, but I don't mind him in tournaments. He does have a fine matchup. And elsewhere for Indiana, no thanks on a 12-game slate. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next game, which is Brooklyn at the New York Knicks. 10-point favorite for Brooklyn in the battle of New York, New Jersey, whatever you want to call it, the Twin States. And it shouldn't be much competition here. Like I said, a 10-point favorite for the Nets. New York, the one bright spot they had, Alexei Shved, out. Carmelo Anthony, of course, out. 193.5-point total here. And if you're looking at this one, you're looking at the guys who are on fire. And that means Brook Lopez. Absolutely playing tremendous basketball right now. 24 or more real points in 6 of his last 7 games. $8,200 on FanDuel. And over on DraftKings, he once again has himself a little bit of a discount at $8,000. Price creeped up just a little bit. It was $78 last night. So back-to-back here. Probably won't be a close game. Shouldn't be a close game. But Brook Lopez, who's he going up against down low? I mean, you've got Cole Aldrich and company. Maybe some Jason Smith. Maybe some Lou Amundsen at the 5. I mean, it's going to be ugly. Brook Lopez, as long as this game stays close for long enough, he's going to crush that front court. It's going to be ugly. You've got guys like Thad Young, came back from injury last game, sitting at $5,900 on FanDuel. DraftKings, he's got a $5,700 tag. Don't mind that. As far as the Knicks go, I don't mind playing Langston Galloway. He's been playing okay basketball. Really not a ton of upside for him there, but he's going to get the minutes. You can lock that in. And Darren Williams, the one other guy I want to mention in this one, playing great basketball right now. Playing low to mid-30s most games outside of that Cleveland game. But he's playing really well. I mean, 34, 30, skip the Cleveland game, 37, 38 fantasy points. And he's got a nice discount, $6,200 on FanDuel. Over on DraftKings, just $5,800. So Darren Williams is a guy that I like quite a bit. Wrote him up in the minutes piece today, the minutes to win it, if you want to check that out. And next game, because that's going to be about it. Not forcing Knicks into my lineup on a 12-game slate. No thanks. That's your funeral if you choose to go that route. Chicago at Milwaukee. We've got a 5-point favorite for Chicago, 192.5 point total here. And this one's going to be tough because both these teams defensive-minded. Chicago, not the defensive stalwarts they were last year and in years past, but there's still a tough matchup for Milwaukee. You've got Aaron Brooks, who's a fine cash game play, sitting at $5,900 on FanDuel. He's a little bit cheaper there on DraftKings, where he's sitting, more expensive at $6,000 there. So really not a guy I'm actively targeting. Move over to shooting guard. Obviously, Jimmy Butler is in play, but his price is just really high, $8,500 on FanDuel. DraftKings, you can get him at 81, a little bit cheaper. But on a 12-game slate, like I mentioned, not an ideal matchup, a slow pace. Yes, Butler could have a very nice game, but I don't think he's necessary. I think he's a fine tournament play. Then elsewhere, you've got Chris Middleton, Giannis Antetokounmpo, both tournament plays for me. Lower floors, big upside. You've got a guy like Nikola Mirotic, who's at $7,500 on FanDuel. Over on DraftKings, he's at $71. I don't mind him. You've got Pau Gasol, who $8,400 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, once again, he's at $89. I like him in tournaments. I like him quite a bit in tournaments, actually. He has actually had some huge games against Milwaukee, and Milwaukee's really struggled against big men. So if this game does stay close, Pau Gasol would be the one player I'd be paying up for outside of tournaments. I like him. Not saying he's a cash game staple, but I think he's in a great spot tonight. I like him quite a bit. Ersan Ilyasova, $5,800 on FanDuel, and over on DraftKings, you can get him at $67. That's too much for me, but tournament play at $5,800 on FanDuel. He was on fire there for a little while, kind of cooled off the last two games and a couple tough matchups. Now going up against the Chicago Bigs, who have size, but they're not tremendous defenders. So I do think he's in play. Next up, Toronto at Minnesota. This is what we're talking about, a higher total, 206.5 point total here. Toronto favored by 9.5 here. So this one's interesting because Kyle Lowry's not going to play. Kevin Martin is doubtful. Looks like the value train is going to run through Minnesota once again. And your obvious plays here, we've said it a million times. Kyle Lowry's out, you play DeMar DeRozan, vice versa. Kyle Lowry's out, you've got to play DeMar DeRozan. Get yourself some exposure. Tremendous matchup. Coming off a 42-11 game against Houston. Just imagine what he can do to this Minnesota team that is shorthanded. Really no great defenders anywhere on this team. And if this game stays close, DeMar DeRozan is in for a feast. I like Lou Williams once again. He's sitting there at $4,900 on FanDuel. Over on DraftKings, he's got a nice price as well at $51. DeMar DeRozan at $81. DraftKings and $8,000 FanDuel. Pricey, but should be well worth it tonight. It's going to be the focal part of the offense. Huge usage rate. And elsewhere, I mean, you've got some point guard values here. You've got Gravis Vasquez, who's getting minutes, really not doing a whole lot with him, but he's a fine cash game play at $4,000 on FanDuel and $48 on DraftKings. I do much prefer him on FanDuel with that price. You can look at Zach LaVine, who, as you know, is going to get some minutes. Ricky Rubio listed as doubtful for this one. He's got a very low floor, but also a nice ceiling. He's sitting at $5,700 on FanDuel, $58 on DraftKings. Don't mind him. Elsewhere, really not going too crazy into these guys because it is almost a 10-point spread. Amir Johnson coming off a really big game last time out, 8.16 boards against Houston. He could have a nice game down low. Over 30 minutes in 3 straight. Very volatile guy. I'm one of many who has hit him on a lot of duds, so certainly not a guy that I'm going to invest heavily in, but multiple tournament lineups, and I know I'll have those. I'll have an Amir Johnson or two in a couple of those bullets there, so I don't mind him at his price, but certainly very risky. Next up on the ballot here, we've got Dallas at OKC. Highest total on the night, 216 points. 2-point favorite for Oklahoma City. Monte Ellis questionable. Obviously, Serge Ibaka, Kevin Durant, both out for the Thunder. And this game is going to be chock full of some fantasy goodness. Russell Westbrook, if you could pay for him, I do think he's in a great spot tonight. Obviously, going to be tough for him to pay off that price tag, as usual. $12,700 sitting there on FanDuel. On DraftKings, the same exact price. But highest total of the night, you've got Dallas, Rajon Rondo, whoever else they throw out there, J.J. Barea, Devin Harris, Raymond Felton, doesn't matter. All of them subpar defenders. Westbrook may need to have a huge game here. I think he will. But As I've said before, my favorite target when OKC is playing now is Enes Kanter. And he is coming off of a subpar performance against Phoenix in 30 minutes. But Dallas, the worst rebounding team in the league. Kanter on fire on the boards. Just 9, 11, and 10 in his last 3 games. But pretty much a lock for a double-double, especially in this matchup. Tyson Chandler, an okay defender. But Enes Kanter will see some time at the 4 against Dirk Nowitzki. Going to give him some trouble with his size as well. So I do love Enes Kanter. He's at $7,500 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, you can get him at a little bit of a discount as well at $7,000. So in play both places. I don't think Steven Adams is a bad play, sitting at $5,700. FanDuel and $6,000 on DraftKings. On the Dallas side of things, you've got Monte Ellis. If he plays, he makes for a nice play at his price tag. Obviously, he left after the last game after just 23 minutes. He's questionable for tonight with a calf injury. He's got significant upside, as you know. $6,500 on DraftKings. His FanDuel price, also pretty enticing at $67. If he goes, I like him a lot. If he does not go, I'm going to be looking at Chandler Parsons. $6,500 on FanDuel. 3 of his last 4 over 30 fantasy points. He's playing huge minutes. Got a nice price on DraftKings as well at $65. Those are my targets for this one. Really everyone in play here with this big total. And Dirk Nowitzki at $5,900 is a fine play as well. I'm not going too much into Dion Waiters. He's playing minutes if you want to go down that route. I'm not forcing him in on this huge slate. You got a guy like Anthony Morrow who has huge upside if he's knocking down his threes, but very, very, very scoring reliant. I'm not touching Mitch McGary, not a chance, unless I heard that one of Steven Adams or Enes Kanter got sick, isn't going to play, something of that nature. I don't expect that at all. Not going to touch anyone else in that one. Next up, Sacramento at Houston. Another nice total, 210.5 points. Houston, an 11.5 point favorite, though. Biggest one on the night. So, a little bit of a blowout concern there, of course. You've got Rudy Gay, who is undergoing concussion protocol. Not expected to play tonight. Very, very unlikely. And obviously, you've got Donatas Motiejunas out. Terrence Jones now upgraded to questionable for today. You've got DeMarcus Cousins, who they said he will, according to George Karl, may sit on road games. It was called an experiment. We're going to see what happens with that. Maybe he plays with Rudy Gay being out, but monitor that. Don't just lock him in and expect he's going to play tonight. Definitely a concern that he may not. In which case, your guys like Dwight Howard, you weren't going to be playing him anyway. Didn't play a lot of minutes recently. He's going to be out of play, of course. You've got guys like James Harden, who are sitting over $11,000 now in a game that could be an easy blowout. Really risky, obviously. Huge upside. One of the highest on the night. I'll get to someone else here in a second. But, I mean, it's going to be really tough to pay for him in a game that's not supposed to be close. So, I'm looking at the cheaper guys here. You've got your guys like Corey Brewer, Trevor Ariza, Josh Smith, like I mentioned. Those are the guys I'm looking at. If DeMarcus Cousins does sit, I don't mind playing some Jason Thompson. He's going to be getting a ton of minutes in that. If that's the case, not extremely productive, but given the opportunity, he's got some upside. He's had a few big games. So this one's going to be tough. It's going to have to wait, see some injury news and see, but really some huge upside here with some guys and a big total. So I'm excited to see what goes on with that one. Next up, Denver at Utah. As expected, just 194.5 point total. -5 for Utah in this one. And this one's going to be pretty tough. I don't like any of the Denver guys against this really tough Utah team. All of them are going to be low owned, but we've seen some minutes really get cut. Kenneth Faried was getting some big minutes, being productive. Now we see he's being cut down. I mean, it's going to be really tough on that end. I'm just going to go ahead and avoid all of the Nuggets tonight. You've got Derek Favors. Maybe he plays, maybe he doesn't. He's listed as questionable right now. Trevor Booker would certainly be in play there if that's the case against a really bad front court. Disappoint everyone against OKC. Turned it around in a great matchup against Minnesota. 17 and 13 for 35 fantasy points. So he makes for a nice play at $4,000 on FanDuel and even cheaper over on DraftKings. Sitting at, more expensive, $4,400. I keep mixing them up. $4,400 there on DraftKings. But either way, if Favors sits, he makes for a great play. You can look at guys like Rudy Gobert, $8,500 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he's listed at $87. Pretty pricey, but great matchup for him. I'm not going to invest too much into this game. That's really the only way I'm looking. Gordon Hayward also in play for tournaments, but not a whole lot of exposure there for me either. LA Clippers at Portland. Here's a good one for us, finally. 210-point total, 2.5-point favorite for Portland at home. And I don't need to tell you the usual suspects here. I mean, you're coming off of an enormous game from Blake Griffin last night. 40 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 blocks, 1 steal. We talked about his huge discounted price tag last night. We told him you need to get yourself some Blake Griffin. In fact, Spencer even recommended a Clippers stack, and hopefully you went with a Clippers stack because Blake Griffin, highest score on the night, it wasn't close, monster game, still sitting at a very, very cheap price tag tonight. $8,600 on DraftKings, the biggest discount, $88 on FanDuel. I will have a ton of Blake Griffin. On the other side of that exact matchup, LaMarcus Aldridge at $9,000 on DraftKings. His FanDuel price a little bit higher, $9,300. Think he's in play as well. I'm not a huge fan of Lillard. Much tougher matchup against Chris Paul, but Lillard's been a target of ours. On the opposite side, we've seen a lot of guys have their way with him recently, and Chris Paul, very consistent again last night, 27 and 9 in 39 minutes. Clippers need to win this game. This is a huge game for playoff seeding, so I expect big things out of Paul and Blake Griffin. I don't mind J.J. Redick at his price. I don't love him either. He's got a very low floor, as you saw last night, but he's locked into minutes. Matt Barnes makes for a fine play there at $5,300 on FanDuel. His DraftKings price sitting at $54. Nicholas Batum, a great play, $6,500 on DraftKings, $6,600 on FanDuel. Don't mind him at all either. Matt Barnes not a great defender, and Batum can kind of do it all. So a lot to be seen in this one. I'm really not paying for DeAndre Jordan at his price. I'd rather have Drummond once again. Robin Lopez, really just a really low floor for him. I mean, he's had a couple double-doubles recently, but no thanks for me on this big slate. Last game up, and one of the most interesting plays of the night. New Orleans at the Los Angeles Lakers. You could probably guess where I'm going with this one. It's an obvious play. I shouldn't need to tell you. I'll give you the odds here real quick. 8-point favorite for New Orleans, 193-point total. Anthony Davis, the brow abides tonight. $12,300 on FanDuel. His DraftKings price over here at $11,400. So definitely very playable on both sites. Much more playable, of course, on DraftKings, but I like him on both spots. The Lakers have had some troubles in their front court all season. They've had troubles at every position, really. You've had some guys resting. You've seen Carlos Boozer miss some time. You've seen Jordan Hill miss some time. None of these guys have a chance to slow down Anthony Davis. Ryan Anderson has been upgraded to questionable tonight, so it's possible that he plays. I don't know that he would necessarily play big minutes. He would probably get a few minutes, get kind of eased back in. Not a guy that I'm going to be actively targeting. I'd like to see how many minutes he plays before I look into him. But you got a lot of guys in play in this one. I mean, it is a low total, but you can look at some cheap guys. You've got Wayne Ellington playing huge minutes for the Lakers. You've got Wesley Johnson playing big minutes. Both those guys under 5K. And then you've got Jordan Clarkson. Man, this guy has been tremendous recently. $6,000 on DraftKings. He's got, of course, a little bit higher of a price tag on FanDuel here at $7,300. So kind of priced out there on FanDuel outside of tournaments, but $6,000 on DraftKings. I mean, that's a gift right there. Love Jordan Clarkson in this spot. Really, in most spots, he's taking a ton of shots. He's got a nice usage rate. I mean, 15, 14, 14, 16, 19 shots taken his last few games. He's got tremendous upside, as we've seen. Like him a great deal. You could look at some Tyreek Evans if you'd like, but really no thanks for me. I mean, not a lot of upside built in at his price. He makes for good tournament play. He should be low owned, but that's about it for me there. And that is going to wrap it up for me today on this Thursday slate. Tomorrow, I'm going to have Christopher Ruckus back on Space Jam 23 DFS. We're going to talk about tomorrow's small slate. So make sure you check out some great content. We've got some market advantage pieces, some minutes, rotations, some injury concerns. Ton of great content at dailyfantasycafe.com today and every day. So make sure you check that out. Find me on Twitter at BigItaly42 if you have any questions. Got some lists of where to look for injury concerns. Obviously, that's a big thing late here in the season. Guys sitting, guys being questionable. A lot of question marks, so I'll try and help you out with that any way I can. We are at DF Cafe, and I'm checking out. I will see you tomorrow.